You're 8,000 meters up the world's most savage mountain. Your legs are shaking. Every breath burns like fire. Below you, fixed ropes, your only lifeline, have just been ripped away by a crashing wall of ice the size of a house. Night is falling fast, and instead of racing down to save yourself, you turn back. You stay. You fight to save strangers tangled in ropes, hanging upside down, screaming for help. That man was Ger McDonnell, an Irish dreamer from Limerick who became the first of his country to stand on top of K2. But hours after his greatest triumph, he chose others over himself. And in doing so, he wrote one of the most powerful stories of courage you'll ever hear. K2, 8,611 meters of pure terror. They call it the Savage Mountain for a reason. Not the tallest, that's Everest, but way deadlier. For every 4 people who try to climb it, one never comes home. Why? Because it's steeper, meaner, and more technical than anything else on Earth. Avalanches roar without warning. Seracs, giant towers of ice, hang like guillotines over the famous Bottleneck, a narrow chute where death waits. By summer 2008, K2 had already claimed over 70 lives in its history. But that season felt different. A perfect storm of climbers gathered at base camp. Dutch-led Nordic expedition. Koreans, Italians, Norwegians, Serbians, Americans, French, more than 20 teams, all eyeing the same narrow window of good weather after weeks of brutal storms. Ger McDonnell was right in the middle of it. Born in Kilcornan, Limerick, Ger was no stranger to high places. He'd already summited Everest. He lived in Alaska, where he trained like a machine, building strength, fixing ropes, learning to survive. Friends called him a natural leader with a huge smile and a bigger heart. He played the bodhrán drum in Irish sessions, loved a good story, and never left anyone behind. As one climbing friend later wrote, Ger was exactly what you saw, competitive, ambitious, but always ready to help. But K2 tests even the strongest. Early in the season, a Serbian climber named Ger McDonnell unclipped from the rope in the Bottleneck to pass someone. He slipped and fell hundreds of meters. His body hung there like a warning. Then another porter, Jahan Beg, tried to help recover him and fell to his death too. The mountain was already angry. Ger and his Nordic team, led by Dutch climber Wilco van Rugen, pushed on. They fixed ropes carefully. They waited for the right day. August 1st looked perfect. Clear skies, low wind. But with so many teams, the Bottleneck became a traffic jam. Climbers lined up like cars on a highway, wasting precious oxygen and daylight. K2, 8,611 meters of pure terror. They call it the Savage Mountain for a reason. Not the tallest, that's Everest, but way deadlier. For every 4 people who try to climb it, one never comes home. Why? Because it's steeper, meaner, and more technical than anything else on Earth. Avalanches roar without warning. Seracs, giant towers of ice, hang like guillotines over the famous Bottleneck, a narrow chute where death waits. By summer 2008, K2 had already claimed over 70 lives in its history. But that season felt different. A perfect storm of climbers gathered at base camp. Dutch-led Nordic expedition. Koreans, Italians, Norwegians, Serbians, Americans, French, more than 20 teams, all eyeing the same narrow window of good weather after weeks of brutal storms. Ger McDonnell was right in the middle of it. Born in Kilcornan, Limerick, Ger was no stranger to high places. He'd already summited Everest. He lived in Alaska, where he trained like a machine, building strength, fixing ropes, learning to survive. Friends called him a natural leader with a huge smile and a bigger heart. He played the bodhrán drum in Irish sessions, loved a good story, and never left anyone behind. As one climbing friend later wrote, Ger was exactly what you saw, competitive, ambitious, but always ready to help. But K2 tests even the strongest. Early in the season, a Serbian climber named Ger McDonnell unclipped from the rope in the Bottleneck to pass someone. He slipped and fell hundreds of meters. His body hung there like a warning. Then another porter, Jahan Beg, tried to help recover him and fell to his death too. The mountain was already angry. Ger and his Norrit team, led by Dutch climber Wilco van Rooyen, pushed on. They fixed ropes carefully. They waited for the right day. August 1st looked perfect. Clear skies, low wind. But with so many teams, the bottleneck became a traffic jam. Climbers lined up like cars on a highway, wasting precious oxygen and daylight. Think about it. You're thousands of meters above sea level. Your brain is starving for air. One wrong step and you're gone. Yet Ger kept climbing. What drove him? Was it just the dream of being first Irishman on top? Or something deeper? That quiet voice inside that says, "This is what I was made for." By late afternoon, 18 climbers had reached the summit. Ger was among them, stepping onto the top around 7 p.m. with a huge grin under his oxygen mask. He took photos. He celebrated with his teammate Pemba, Giles Sherpa. But the clock was ticking. Darkness was coming. And nobody knew that far below, a massive serac was about to break loose. The mountain had been watching, waiting, and now it was ready to strike. The summit joy didn't last long. As Ger started down with Italian climber Marco Confortola and Wilco van Rooyen, disaster hit around 8:30 p.m. A huge serac, an ice tower the size of a building, cracked and collapsed right above the traverse, that deadly slope just below the summit. Ropes snapped like threads. An avalanche roared down the bottleneck, sweeping away everything in its path. Norwegian climber Rolf Bay, who had turned back earlier, was buried instantly. His wife Cecilie Skog heard the crack and saw his headlamp vanish forever. Suddenly, more than a dozen climbers were trapped above the broken ropes. No way down. Night falling fast. Temperatures dropping to -30. Ger, Marco, and Wilco dug shallow snow holes to bivouac, basically huddle and pray not to freeze. They shouted to stay awake. "Stick with me," Marco told Ger, according to later reports in Outside magazine. They sang songs to fight the cold and the fear. Down below, chaos. Sherpas like Pemba Giles were already descending without ropes, risking everything. French climber Hugues Diabarid ran out of oxygen and fell into the void. More screams echoed in the dark. Ger had every reason to focus on himself. He'd just achieved his dream, but the mountain wasn't done. Another serac fall later that night created more chaos. And then, in the early hours of August 2nd, Ger and Marco spotted something horrifying on a steep, icy slope. 3 climbers, Korean team members, including Ger McDonnell, a Sherpa, and others, were tangled in a mess of ropes and fixed lines. They were hanging upside down, bodies twisted, one boot missing, barely alive. One was still conscious, calling weakly for help. Most people would have kept going. Save yourself. Get down. But not Ger. He and Marco stopped. For over 3 hours, they worked in the death zone, that place above 8,000 meters where your body starts to die. They tried to untangle ropes. They pulled. They cut. They shouted encouragement. According to Marco's first accounts in the Belfast Telegraph, the Koreans were still alive, but 2 of them were in very critical condition. Ger refused to leave. As his brother-in-law Damien O'Brien later wrote in the journal.ie, Ger had a history of saving people on the mountains. It would have been out of character for him to do nothing. What people have to remember about Ger was that he was never going to leave these guys. But the mountain wasn't finished. Ice groaned. Another collapse was coming. Tension built with every minute. Would the rescuers save them in time? Or would the savage mountain claim everyone? Here's where the story gets even more gripping, and where different voices tell slightly different tales. Marco Confortola, exhausted and frostbitten, later said in interviews, like in Men's Journal by Matthew Power, that after 3.5 hours they couldn't free the Koreans. The glacier was cracking nearby. He said Ger, maybe confused from lack of oxygen, suddenly turned and started climbing back up toward the summit, offering no explanation. Marco shouted, but got no response. Then he heard the roar of another avalanche and saw yellow boots, Ger's boots, tumbling past in the snow. They were Jesus's boots, Marco said, calling Ger by his nickname because of his beard and kind nature. He was in pieces. It sounded like confusion won. Like the mountain broke even the strongest mind. But wait, other perspectives paint a very different picture. one of pure courage. Wilco van Rooyen, the Dutch leader who survived after 2 nights alone on the mountain, strongly disagreed. In his book Surviving K2 and later accounts, he said Ger was actively helping, using a special load transfer technique he'd learned in Alaska to anchor ropes and free the trapped climbers. Wilco believed Ger stayed right until the end. Then came a Sherpa's view. Pemba Gild Sherpa, who had climbed with Ger on Everest, provided key evidence. He and other rescuers, Sering Boat and Big Pong Boat, raced up from Camp 4. They found Marco unconscious in the snow, gave him oxygen, and brought him around. On the way down, they rendezvoused with the now-freed Koreans, and they reported seeing another climber in a red and black suit, exactly what Ger wore, coming down behind them. Damien O'Brien flew to Islamabad after the tragedy to talk to everyone firsthand. In his column, he said the Sherpas confirmed they had been freed, but sadly they said that an avalanche had taken the lives of the men they saw, Ger's life and that of the Koreans. Alan Arnett, a respected climbing journalist, summed it up in his tribute. Just before his death, Ger made a heroic effort to rescue 3 fellow climbers tangled in a snare of ropes at 8,200 meters. So which is it? A man lost in delirium? Or a hero who kept fighting until the very last second? The family believes the second. Ger had saved lives before. He was kind, caring, the kind of guy who lit up a room. He wasn't going to walk away. Think about that choice. In the death zone, your brain is foggy. Your body is shutting down. Yet Ger chose hope over fear. He chose others over himself. What does that say about human spirit? Would you have the courage to stay when every instinct screams run? The tension was unbearable. Ice cracking, wind howling, ropes creaking under weight. One wrong move, and it was over. Marco was alone now, crawling and stumbling down the mountain. He was completely snowblind, meaning his eyes were fried by the UV rays, and he could barely see. He was using his ice axe to tap the ground in front of him just to find the path. He fell into crevasses. He blacked out. He literally slid down parts of the mountain on his back, just hoping he wouldn't go over a cliff. For 2 more days, he was up there, trapped in the cold. Finally, on August 5th, he crawled into base camp. His feet were blocks of ice. His hands were wrecked. He was the last survivor to make it off that mountain alive. A helicopter flew him out the next day. In total, 11 people died in that 48-hour window. Ger McDonnell, the Irishman who tried to help, was found dead in the ice. The Koreans didn't make it. The mountain had taken its toll. When Marco got to the hospital, doctors had to cut off several of his toes. But in the media, he was a hero. They called him the toughest man on the mountain. He had stared death in the face for 36 hours and won. Ger McDonnell died doing what he loved, helping others. As Damien O'Brien put it, our Ger died a hero on K2. His story leaves us with powerful lessons. First, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting when fear is screaming at you. Ger was tired, cold, in the death zone, yet he stayed. Second, never underestimate the power of one selfless act. In a world that often tells us to look out for number one, Ger reminds us that real strength is lifting others up. Third, prepare. Ger trained hard, respected the mountain, but even he couldn't control everything. Life is like K2, unpredictable. So chase your dreams, but with eyes open. And the biggest lesson? In your own death zone moments, when work is crushing you, when a friend needs help at 2 a.m., when life feels too steep, ask yourself, will I turn back for someone else? Will I choose hope? Ger suggests yes. Always yes. His life teaches us to live fully, love deeply, and never leave anyone behind. So next time you're facing your own mountain, big or small, remember Ger, smile like you did, help like you did, and keep climbing. If Ger McDonnell's story touched you, if it made you think about courage, sacrifice, or what really matters, smash that like button right now. Subscribe for more real-life stories of heroes who refuse to quit. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in Ger's boots? Would you have stayed to help? Tag a friend who needs this reminder of human strength. Thanks for watching. Stay strong. Stay kind. The mountain is always watching, but so is the world. See you in the next adventure.